obviously friend of the show, as I get him on camera as well. Brett, thank you so much for taking the time for joining us, man. I know you're running around, so this is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a busy time. NBA Summer League, you know it. You see everybody on the concourse, the scouts, the agents, the players, even they're out on the concourse. It's just a great time. You know it, seeing the games and whatnot. And obviously, just down the road is the Las Vegas Strip, and there's no better view when you're walking out of Thomas and Mack Center than seeing that. So it's a great time, and we're kind of wrapping up now because people depart at this stage of Summer League. But there's still a lot going on, and there's still a lot of contract situations to figure out, Alan.
Well, let's get right into it. You know, I was joking with you because this was my first Summer League, and of course everybody's saying this one's a little bit quieter with the CBA and the restricted free agency situations that are happening. I kind of gave an update based on what I had been hearing about Jonathan Kuminga, just as far as kind of his value and how he's viewed in the league, his star potential, if you will. There was supposed to be a conversation, if I'm not mistaken. You had put that in your Siegel scoops. Do we know where this thing is going? I know there was a report that, hey, that he's probably going to stay. Does that mean the conversation happened and this is where it ended, or what do you think?
I'm still waiting to hear about those conversations, and I believe that they are extending into this week, early this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, was what I heard last week. Is that's when they're going to really sit down and discuss things, not only with the Warriors side of things, but see what other interest is out there, because you had the Kings' interest, you had rumored interest from the Miami Heat, the Chicago Bulls were another team that were mentioned, but there hasn't been any movement on that front because the Bulls are dealing with their own problems with Josh Giddey, and there's a big discrepancy with money there of how much money Giddey wants, how much money the Bulls are willing to give him. And they're very far apart on those conversations. So for them to go out and start things with Kuminga, not necessarily the best look when you're trying to bring Josh Giddey back. So there hasn't been much movement there. The Kings front, there was talk of the Kings offering that sign and trade package that we had discussed previously. Nothing really came of that. The Warriors weren't really listening to it much. There was not any movement there. And then obviously the Miami Heat went out and got Norman Powell. And so that pretty much takes you off the table right there, because you're now hard capped at the first apron. They're about 3, 4, 5 million from that. So you're talking about having to now move Andrew Wiggins or Terry Rozier just to bring in Jonathan Kuminga, and it just, the money doesn't make sense there. So there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this situation. We've reported that it's most likely that Jonathan Kuminga will be returning to the Warriors, with an understanding that he will most likely be moved once he becomes eligible to do so in January. But it's just a very weird conversation for us to talk about. And obviously behind the scenes, you can just imagine what it is for them. But when you're face to face as the player, the agent, and the team, and you're talking to them, there's a lot more clarity there. And you're allowed to say what you want freely to them, and you can really camera out what his role is going to be. And I'm sure those are the conversations that are going to be had between him and the Warriors, because there's a lot of people in that organization that want him back, including at the very top with Joe Lacob, and we've talked about that countless times. So it sounds like that they're going to bring him back and they're going to look to trade him, but there's a few months there that you can play around with. And if he's playing really well when he becomes trade eligible, what happens then? Are you going to wind up moving him if he starts fitting in and he's liking his role there? So it's a very mysterious situation. I think that's a good word to say.
Malik Monk is a name who right now it got brought up, but not officially. He was not in any reported trade package to the Warriors. What do you think about Malik Monk's value when it comes to the Warriors, and if there'd be interest there and just in the league in general? We talked to a Raptors person last week, and that report that came out a couple of weeks ago that the whole Detroit thing, and well, that's because he doesn't have as much value. What are you hearing on Malik Monk?
Yeah, well, the Raptors stuff, they fired Masai Ujiri, and he was a fan of Malik Monk there. So I guess we can kind of cross them out, maybe. But looking at Malik Monk's value around the league, he's under contract this year, then he's under contract next year, and then he enters the final year of his contract. Those contracts that have 3 years left, 4 years left, the teams hate them. And it's because of this new CBA where you're trying to create flexibility for yourself in that first apron, in that second apron. And now if you're tying yourself down to, it's not a bad contract. And I know that we've talked about this before, where $18 million for a guy that is contributing as a Sixth Man of the Year candidate, 16 points a game, 17 points per game, averaging like 38% from 3-point range. That's a good player. But that contract, when you have that for the next 3 seasons, You don't have much flexibility there when you're a team that has 2 max players, maybe even a third max player.
Right.
And so that's really what the CBA has taken away. It's taken away that middle tier of players. And you can even look at that trade that the Denver Nuggets made with Michael Porter Jr., where they had to get rid of him to open up the ability to bring in those middle tier players, to bring back Bruce Brown, bring in Cam Johnson, to make the trade for Jonas Valanciunas. So it's not that he doesn't have value around the league. Teams like Malik Monk, he could fit in with a lot of different teams, but it's the money factor. And it's trying to find a suitor, especially this late in free agency, this late in the offseason, that can take on that kind of money. So I don't really see any movement in terms of the offseason for Malik Monk. Most likely going to be one of those situations that we talked about where like DeMar DeRozan could be available at the trade deadline. Probably going to be the same thing with Malik Monk, especially given that injuries always play a role, where in the regular season, unfortunately, there's going to be star players that go down. It's just the nature of it. And maybe Malik Monk finds a home then.
Talking to Brett Siegel of ClutchPoints. Brett, another name that I've been talking with, just a couple people about is Zach LaVine. And obviously he's got a year left, and then he's got a player option that we all know 99% sure he's going to accept. Will things open up for the Kings with Zach LaVine once he's on an expiring deal, or is he just making so much money, even if it's just 1 year, nobody's going to touch it?
Well, we said the same thing about Michael Porter Jr. He's stuck with Denver, and they're going to have to just keep him until the end of that contract. Not a bad player, but a contract, one of the worst in the league. Now we look at Zach LaVine, and he only has that 1 more year left, and then the player option. Maybe there is some optionality there where a team, all of a sudden, someone goes down, their hopes of making the playoffs and being a real contender go down, and maybe they're willing to take back money and take back future picks in order to offload some salary to create that flexibility. And we saw the Nets do that after the whole Kevin Durant saga. Maybe there's something that happens there with the Kings and Zach LaVine. But right now, I wouldn't really expect anything on that front. He's going to be on the Kings roster to start the season. I feel very confident about saying that with Domantas Sabonis as well. He wants to stay there. His family loves Sacramento. They love being there. And he's the face of the franchise now, especially with De'Aaron Fox gone. So all these guys are still monitoring what's going to happen with the Kings. Scott Perry, new GM, takes over, new philosophy. Doug Christie finally has a full year to really implement his system, full offseason to work with these guys. So I think we are going to have a different feel about the Kings this year. I think that they're going to be a lot more energetic than they were to end last season. There's going to be kind of not necessarily the same as when that Bean team happened, where there was all that energy with Mike Brown, but we're going to see these guys come out and fight for Doug Christie. We're going to see them come out and fight for Scott Perry. And they're really going to try to cement themselves as a true playoff threat in the Western Conference during those first few months of the season. Obviously, around the time of the NBA Cup, that's going to be a very important time for them to really prove themselves, kind of like we saw with the Pelicans during that first NBA Cup run when Zion and Brandon Ingram were there. And we were talking about them, are they an up-and-coming team in the West? And ultimately, injuries decided that for them. But I think that's a similar path for what we'll see from the Kings this year. But the West is stacked. I mean, there's 13 teams that can legitimately get into the playoffs, whether it's an actual playoff spot or via the play-in tournament. Obviously, if you're a Utah Jazz fan, that's one of the teams that's not going to be making it. They're still rebuilding and all that. But the Kings are certainly in that play-in conversation entering the year. Probably not what you want to hear and Kings fans want to hear, but that's just the reality of where they are. They're going to be shuffling around things financially during the season, especially ahead of the trade deadline. And then looking ahead to the 2026 offseason, that's kind of already the chatter surrounding them is who's going to be available. Is Domantas Sabonis going to ask out? Are they going to move DeMar DeRozan before then? But I do think that Scott Perry wants to kind of clear his books a little bit and have that optionality where he can go out and make moves like they did this offseason to get Dennis Schroeder.
Brett Siegel, thank you so much for joining us. First time in person, man. Hopefully it will not be the last time. Thank you for joining us. Follow Brett Siegel on ClutchPoints. He is giving us all the information that we need. When we return, we'll be joined by Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype. We'll be right back. Out in Style, Sactown Sports.